All right, and for our final lecture of the day, we have the third lecture by Philippe Michel.
Okay, so I will continue as so first there was something I forgot to say last time. It was that this counting argument, so the bound on the number of isomorphism classes of irreducible sheaves of conductor say less than C, so that we discussed. So it was joint work with Etienne Fouvry and Emmanuel Kowalski. So a lot of what I will say today and also tomorrow is either joint work with them or is in the work of Katz. Okay, so as I explained last time, we were able to sum trace function over intervals, and we have seen that kind of the smallest interval one can sum a trace function over and while getting some non-trivial information is about the square root of Q, of the characteristic. So now, and I recall you, the proof involved Delinis' work, and implicitly you have seen a kind of new geometric object occurring, which was this Fourier transform. And I explained it as a geometric kind of incarnation. So I will, today I will discuss another application of this thing, which is, summing trace functions along primes. So basically, do I have a name for it? No, okay. Basically, what we will consider is a sum of the following shape: sum over p less than x of k of p. Okay, for k, some trace function modulo q, the over prime. And so what we would like to know is whether we can get a non-trivial bound for this sum. And again, so goal, whenever possible, is again beat the trivial bound, which is big O, which of the infinity norm of k times, let's say, x over log x. Okay. So this is not completely idle question. So I will state a theorem. So, of course, if you have an analytic number theorist and you have an arithmetic function in front of you, you want to sum it over the integer, and the next thing you want to do is to sum it along the prime. So that's just a reflex. And so this is what we do here. So suppose that the sheaf. So, and I don't state all the hypotheses I put, but I'm asking that f be weight 0 irreducible and less than some operation set, and I have its conductor to control various, so the complexity of the sheaf or of the trace function, and such that, so irreducible, weight 0, such that, so this sheaf, F, is not geometrically isomorphic to any tensor product of the shape L psi tensor L chi. So for any psi and chi. So it means basically that the trace function is not proportional to the product of a Dirichlet character and an additive character. So if you are not of that shape, then you have the following statement. For x greater than 1 and say eta less than 1 over 24, then the sum which is here is bounded by a constant which depends on the conductor of the sheaf, and the dependency is polynomial, times x times 1 plus q over x to the 1 over 12 times q to the minus eta over 2. Okay, so what does this bound say? This bound is non-trivial if x is greater than q to the 3/4. Okay, you improve over the trivial bound here as long as this variable is a bit larger than 3/4 of q, or maybe one should add maybe some powers of log, or 3/4 plus epsilon for epsilon positive. And for instance, if you consider the sum over all the prime less than q, okay, so you average over the full interval 1 to q, but you, instead of summing over all the integers, you just pick the primes, and for x equals q, one saves, so power q to the, say, minus 1 over 48 plus epsilon over the trivial bound. Okay. Okay, so as I said, so this sort of theorem, it's really the outcome of instinctive reflex for an analytic number theorist, but it's not purely idle. It has some application. So so there are several possible applications, but one of them is an answer to a question of Serre to Sarnak. So, and what was the question? So, Sarnak was giving a talk and involving Klosterman sums. And so let's take some general integer. And so let's say my Klosterman sum, KL n C, is defined by 1 over square root of C times the sum over x in Z mod C star, the invertible element of E of C times x minus 1 plus nx. Okay, where EC is the additive character, but of modulus C, where C is the general integral number. And you have so you can use Deligne bound, and in fact it was basically due to Weil that you have this bound. So KL and C is bounded by 2 to the omega of C, which is the number of prime factors of C times, and that's it. Okay, and so what Sarnak was discussing, he was discussing the problem of, say, averaging. He was discussing this problem. So you fix n. So let's say n equal 1, and you consider the average of this Klosterman sum, but you average them over their modulus, not over the n. So it's a bit different. Let's say, okay, let's take just for definiteness n equals 1. And so there is a technique from the theory of automorphic forms, which in that case it's due to Linik or Kuznetsov, which say that this sum is bounded by C to the 1 minus, I don't remember the exponent, but it's something positive. Maybe 1 over 6, maybe. Okay. So it says that, okay, so when you have this bound, in his lecture, Sarnak says this bound, because you improve over the trivial bound, this bound shows that the Klosterman sum have their sign, and their sign change, and you have oscillation, and this is responsible for having this being small. And so then Serre asks, but how can you be sure that the cancellation comes from the oscillations of the sum and not from the fact that these sums are all very small, which is that this bound is not optimal? Okay? So Serre asks, is so the Weil bound optimal as C varies. Okay, and and so the corollary of what I am explaining is corollary, it's yes. And even in some kind of very precise, in somewhat precise form, so say that there exists a positive proportion of pairs of primes, PQ, distinct, such that, so the Klosterman sum, evaluated at n is 1 and of modulus PQ, so this Klosterman sum is absolute value. In absolute value is greater than 0.16. So then, because you have this it proves that if you put absolute value here, you will get something which is at least of size C over log C. Okay, so really this exponent, this positive exponent eta, really comes from the Klosterman sum oscillating. So I should say, and probably you know, that the Klosterman sum also oscillates if you kind of fix C and let n go to infinity. And when C is a prime, this is a manifestation of the Sato-Tate laws for this Klosterman sum. So because these Klosterman sums, they are traces of Frobeniuses, and then you may want to look how these Frobeniuses get equi-distributed in fact, in SU2 in that case. So, but here it goes just like in the direction of the Sato-Tate conjecture for elliptic curves. It's a bit twisted because here you don't have in the modulus you don't have just a single prime Q. You have almost a prime, a product of two primes. And in any case, the proof of this corollary is a consequence, or so a long consequence, or may use this theorem here. Okay. So, and there are other problems. So, for instance, when you study the distributions of zeros in families of L functions, so the Katz-Sarnak philosophy, when in your problem you face the question of summing a trace function along the primes, and so you can also use this result. Yeah.
So this bound is so for Q constant.
So Q is going to go to infinity.
Why should it be for a Q constant like 5 or something like that?
Oh, 5. So, but then it will be absorbed in the. So if this is 5.
I agree.
Okay. So you want to know what happens when X is very large. So you get some saving, but in some sense, the larger X is, the simpler. So if X is very large compared to Q, this becomes a very simple problem. Because imagine it's 5. So then what you do is that you K function, it depends only on it's a K function mod Q. So to average this K function over the prime, you just need a Dirichlet prime number theorem, for instance. Okay? So the game here is really to do something when X is a polynomial in Q and even possibly smaller. In fact, so just your question, it reminds me of saying something. So you see, this theorem, it excludes one case or several cases. The case, for instance, where your trace function is a Dirichlet character. And it's really a pity because if we were able to prove something like this, so if we were able to prove something like this, then it would mean we would be able to prove that the Dirichlet L function has no zero in a vertical strip to the an absolute vertical strip to the left of a real part of S equal 1. So such statement would essentially give you a quasi-Riemann hypothesis. So you see, there is no cheap meal again. The one which are excluded by this theorem are really the most interesting ones. But okay, so that's yeah. Okay, so I want to explain the proof, and so. Because the proof, it will be the occasion to develop other notions associated to trace function. And so I will, to present the proof, I will simplify things a bit. So first I will take X to be Q. So basically I just want to put Q here. So I want to prove a bound of the form Q to the 1 minus 1 over 48. And also I will prove a smoothed version. I will discuss a smoothed version. So I fix some smooth, compactly supported function in, say, in the interval 1, 2. So I fix this function and I consider the sum. And now I consider, and it's a natural thing to do. So I replace the characteristic function of the prime by the von Mangel function. Where lambda of n is the standard von Mangel function, and you know that if you want to sum over primes, it's essentially equivalent to summing against the von Mangel function. Okay, and so to do this, and this is a standard in analytic number theory, one use a combinatorial decomposition of this of the von Mangel function, and here, for instance, there is this identity of Heath-Brown. So there are other possibilities depending on your taste. So which states the following for j greater than 1 and n, so let's say less than 2q. So lambda of n equals the sum of little j1 to big J. And then you have a big sum, m1, mj, mj plus 1, m2j of, so what do I require? I require that this first j variable are smaller than some quantity, z. Of now I have the Möbius function for the first j variables, and then I have a log of n1, and then I have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so this is again, something standard in when doing analytic number theory.
Sorry, just a question. Log of M1?
Log of, oh, sorry, mj plus 1. Excuse me, I just improvised and switched notation from my notes. Okay.
What do you mean by the 1, 1, 1, 1?
So, okay, so what I mean by this is that I have two j variables. I have a summation over two j variables. So the first j variables, they are weighted by the value of their Möbius function. So the j plus 1 variable is weighted by the log, and the other ones are weighted by 1. Okay.
And there's no restriction on the other M's.
Yeah, exactly. And so what is very important, because if j is large, then this z will be relatively small. And so then you see that the variable which are weighted by the Möbius function, which is rather wild function, they are rather short, while the over j the remaining j functions, they are weighted by something which is a smooth function, either a log or the constant function. So they are nicely smooth, so-called smooth variables. And so what is important is that the wild variables are short, they are constrained. Question? Or? What the, yeah, sorry, I should have added, yeah, thank you. M1 times M2J equals N. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if you want to put it in a different way, so the sum the sum we consider decompose as a multi-sum, as a sum of multi-sums which are of the shape sum over M1 Mj less than this Z of mu of M1 mu of Mj, and then we have M1 Mj plus 1 M2J with no constraint of log of Mj plus 1 times my smooth function, so V of M1 M2 M2J over Q times Q of M1 Mj plus 1 M2J. Okay, so then what you have to evaluate is this multi-sum in 2J variables. And the various variables, they have attached to them different weights. And so what we want to show is that for each of these sum, we want to show that each of these sum is bounded by Q to the 1 minus this number 1 over 40. In fact, we will do better because it is smooth. So the proof will show something slightly better because it's a smooth summation. And okay, so now what can we do? So suppose that so we make a normalization up to permuting variables. Suppose that so the M2J is the largest of the last J variable, M2J up to changing the order. So what could we do? One thing we could do, okay. Okay, maybe I should do, so decompose the sum further by partition of unity. And so what do we have? So we have sums, so we have parameters M1 Mj, Mj plus 1 M2J, such that the Mi are less than Z if I is less than J. And then the product M1, M2 up to M2J is of size about Q. And the sum we have to face are of the shape times V of M1 over M1, so V1, V2 of J times K of M1 M2J. So what we have done with this partition of unity, we have split the various the 2j variable into well-defined ranges. Maybe I should say what are these. So where the VI's are again smooth, compactly supported function in this interval. Okay, so just what I have done, I have just localized my variable to belong to certain ranges, and basically this sum decomposes into a sum of about log q to the 2j sums that we have to bound. So, but it's only a logarithmic number of subsums. And now we will address the bound on these sums. And so the first thing to do is that suppose that say the okay. So suppose that the largest range, M2j, is greater than, say, q to the 1/2 plus delta. So what we can do is that we fix M1, M2j minus 1. Okay, we fix them, and then what remains on the last variable, we have this sum over M2j of k of M2j times this fixed number times V of M2j over M2j. So what we are doing essentially here, when we have so this is a fixed number, so let's call it A. So here, what we are doing, we are summing this trace function, k of A times M, over something like a smooth version of an interval whose length is a bit larger than q to the 1/2 plus delta. So the Polya-Vinogradov method, in that case, gives you that the sum is bounded by, so M1 up to M2j minus 1 times q to the 1/2, even there is no log q, but just to be consistent. So it's bounded by this, and so because this M2j is greater than q to the 1/2 plus delta, and the product of the M2j of the big M variable is about q, so which is bounded by q to the 1 minus delta log q. So, and imagine that this delta is 1 over 48, then for all the sums such that the M2j variable is sufficiently large, you have the required cancellation. So what we will do next is that now we will suppose that, so we have treated a bunch of the possible sums, and for the remaining sums, we use different techniques. Okay. So then let's assume that M2j is less than q to the 1/2 plus delta. So it's a relatively short variable, and all these variables here are also relatively short. Okay, they are in the Polya-Vinogradov range when you don't save much by applying the Polya-Vinogradov method. And the reason is that, and you see, so here, the j I guess one takes j equals 3. So, yeah.
If that K,
Yeah.
product of M2G, M1, M2G minus 1 should just be N, right?
It's some n, it's some number, yeah, it's a fixed thing.
But you're fixing N for each one of the sums. So this
Yeah.
should be a sum of, so the sum of V of M2G over V.
Oh, yeah, so I have my V2G, and of course here I isolate, and here I have a bunch of M1, M2J minus 1 with the V which are here. V1, V2J minus 1. So they are here. So what I do is that I consider just the inside sum, I bound it non-trivially, and the rest I just do add the terms. So, and then I have M1 up to M2J sums, this product of sums, and then I have the bound from Polya-Vinogradov. Okay, so we need to use other methods, but you see that, so the first J variables, they are very short because, so Z is Q to the 1/3, so it's something short. Okay, it's less than Q to the 1/2, and these ones, they are usually smaller than Q to the 1/2. So the next ID is group variables, so for instance, you group variables so as to form a large product. Okay, for instance, you can, so it means that one partition the set 1 of indices from 1 to the 2j into two sets. So I don't know, call it E and J. And then let's call M the product over I in I of the Mi, and call N to be the product over J in J of the Mj. Okay, so then the range of M is about the product of the Mi, and the range of N is the product of the Mj, and so let's call it M, and let's call it N, and so then you have that the product Mn equals to Q. And so suppose which one? Okay, there is a partition. So that, let's say N, so is a big variable, is greater than Q to the 1/2 plus delta. Okay, and so then what would you get? You get a sum in two variables, so M of size M, sum of N of size N, of K of M N, and here you have some weights. So you have the weights. Basically, it's the product of the over all the possible decomposition of M into this Mi variable, or the weights which are attached to them, and similarly for the second one. Okay, so these weights, they are a multiplicative convolution of these weights, which are either Möbius function times a smooth function or just a smooth functions. Okay, and so then what we would like to do is, on this sum, because n is long, we would like to use the Polya-Vinogradov method. But we cannot. We cannot because this variable, it's not the characteristic function of an interval. It may be something very wild. It may look like a divisor function or look like that convolution of Möbius function and constant functions in some range. So it can be something really complicated, and it's definitely not like an interval or a smooth function. So then there is a trick to address this problem, which is use the Cauchy-Schwarz, so to smooth the variable. So one say that my sum will be bounded by, so I do the Cauchy-Schwarz, so I will have sum over n around big N of the square and here I have something like, I have now the L2 norm, what do I have? Yeah, I have the L2 norm of the Bn, which is of size n to the 1/2 plus little o of 1, and I have this sum. Okay? But what is the effect of this thing? So now to have my bound, it is sufficient to bound this second portion. And what is this second portion? So I just open the square. So this is sum over M1, M2, or maybe M and M prime of alpha M prime conjugate times the sum over the n of what? Of k of m times n times k of m primes n conjugate. And n varies over an interval of length big N about. Okay? So now I have something to which I can use for which I can use the Polya-Vinogradov method, because the function m goes to km of n times km prime of n conjugate is a trace function of which sheaf, the sheaf which is the pullback of the multiplication by m map times my sheaf, tensor product with the pullback of the multiplication by m prime map times the dual sheaf. Okay? And so now I may want to use the Polya-Vinogradov method. So it may not always work. Why? Because, so first you have to eliminate some portion. So you have to first remove the so-called diagonal term. So the m equals m prime contribution, because here you will have the sum over the n of the square in absolute value of k of mn, and it's something non-negative, so it will not oscillate. Okay? If you prefer, you will have f tensor by its dual. It's a representation which will always contain the trivial representation. So you cannot use Polya. So then it's not a Fourier sheaf, if you prefer. So let us remove m equals m prime. You can do nothing about it. So the contribution of m equals m prime, it's what? It's sum over m of, so m equals m prime, it's the L2 norm of the square of the L2 norm of the alphas times n. there is nothing you can do about it. So it's a size m square times n. It will contribute by like this into this sum. Okay, but let me remind you here the trivial bound for this sum it is m. What is it? No, it's strange. Sorry. It's if you do the trivial bound, it will be m square times n, and so I have missed. Oh no, sorry, it's mn. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay. Good. Perfect. So here it's better than the trivial bound. So you have done something non-trivial, but because you are summing over a diagonal thing. Okay. So this is mn, and here the trivial is m square n. So you are safe in a sense by removing this term. You don't. So you save something, and now you have the m different from m prime. And so then you want to look at so the Polya-Vinogradov method. So you need to see. So you need to see if the Fourier transform of this function, so 1 over square root of q times the sum of x of k of mx k of m prime x conjugate time eq of y. So if this thing is absolutely bounded. Sorry, yeah, y times x, yeah, bounded. Okay. So, but so then you need to understand this, and so we can compute this thing. So we compute with Plancherel. Okay, because here you have the sum of a function times an additive character multiplied by the complex conjugate of another function. So the Plancherel formula will tell you that this sum is 1 over q to the 1/2 times the sum over so sum over y, and then okay, maybe I hope I won't make mistake. Okay, so it's a Fourier transform. I change this notation for the Fourier transform of okay, sum over y, or of y minus z over m times the Fourier transform of the conjugate of y over m prime. I think it's something like this. And so if you change variable, it's 1 over q to the 1/2 times the sum over y of k hat of gamma y times k hat complex conjugate of y, where gamma is the following matrix. It's m prime over m times minus no, what is my z? It's x, sorry, excuse me. Minus x over m, 1. So this is this upper triangular matrix. Modulo errors, it's something like this. Yeah. So, So then, what we want to show is whether this sum is bounded, absolutely bounded or not. And again, and then this sum, it's a correlation sum of two sheaves of the Fourier transform of f pullbacked by this gamma tensor. It's the dual of the Fourier transform of f. And so okay, so now this Fourier transform f, it's an irreducible sheaf, so its Fourier transform, I've explained, it's irreducible. We could, it's me? Yeah, okay. So what we need to decide for which gammas of that shape does so R so f at and so gamma star of f at isomorphic. So what you want to, you want to decide, okay, it's a correlation, no, excuse me. So it's a trace function associated to this sheaf, and it's a correlation of these two sheaves. Sorry. Okay, so this is a question we will answer tomorrow. And to answer this, we will discuss the notion of group of automorphism of a sheaf and look at what can be the size of this group of automorphism. And so then we will have a first way to bound another way to bound our sum. So we will cover another range of sums, and then we will need a third method to address the last portion, which cannot be covered by the Polya-Vinogradov or this method. Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Okay, good.